President Donald Trump, in his second inaugural address, mentioned going to Mars, sending Americans to Mars, and did not mention the moon. How much can we read into that? What can we infer about the space policy under Donald Trump in his second term? Well, hint, not much. I want to go over a little bit of what he has said now and in the past, as well as previous presidents and what they have said during their speeches. There's one thing that I think that an inaugural speech really does, which is showcase the vision of the president. And this is throughout all of history of America, right? Whenever there is a big address to the nation, to Congress, it's all about showcasing what the president's priorities are. And in this case today, Mars was enough of a priority for Trump for him to mention it, for him to give a nod to his friend Elon Musk, who was in the crowd, and the camera actually panned to him.
Expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
So it is clear that President Trump still has an interest in Mars. And if you have not watched the video I did a couple of weeks back where I mentioned all the times that Donald Trump has expressed interest in Mars, go ahead and watch that video. I'll link it above. It really goes into what he said back in even 2017, 2018, early in his first presidency, when he was exploring the idea of sending astronauts to Mars and then understanding that the Artemis program is meant to eventually send humans to Mars. Not in anytime soon. However, the way that NASA has worked and the way that NASA has worked these programs for decades now is that the focus has been on the moon, with Mars being an eventuality. A horizon goal is what they typically call it. It is expensive to send humans to Mars. It is something that no one has ever done before and that we don't really have the technology, or we don't fully understand the technology and the technology readiness to send humans to Mars, which is a much farther away body than the moon. And so the moon was always seen as a bit of a stepping stone and a learning ground, a training ground to then eventually send humans to Mars. Now, it sounds like Donald Trump may be emphasizing Mars in his second term in a way that he did not in his first term. And it is clear also that he has a distinct interest in space outside of the concept of sending people to Mars. Here's what Trump said in his inaugural address in 2017.
We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the Earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow.
You might have noticed that he mentioned ridding the Earth of disease. So these are visions, right? These are not necessarily plans or realities. They are visions for what the president wants to focus on. Ridding the world of disease, ridding Earth of disease sounds fantastic, as well as harnessing energy and all the other things that he said in that speech in 2017, but they did not come to fruition. But it is an indicator of where the president wants to go. And anybody who says, here is what Donald Trump is going to do with NASA, with this direction of space, with space policy, is simply speculating. There is no one who can tell you what Donald Trump is going to do with his space policy except for Donald Trump himself. So I can sit here and tell you what I want Donald Trump to do with NASA, with space policy. In fact, I actually did a video on that at the start of the year. You can watch that up above. But no one can tell you that this is exactly what he's going to do. So you have to be careful with speculation here. It's all about the priorities of the president and not necessarily what is going to happen. Take, for example, 10 years ago, President Barack Obama and his State of the Union address, where he specifically mentioned Mars. I think I might be one of the few people who remember the social media hashtag Journey to Mars. That was his thing. Yes, he focused on asteroids as well, but his focus was canceling the Constellation program. That was a Moon to Mars program under George W. Bush, and instigating some kind of Humans to Mars initiative.
Out into the solar system. Not just to visit, but to stay. Last month we launched a new spacecraft as part of a re-energized space program that will send American astronauts to Mars. And in 2 months, to prepare us for those missions, Scott Kelly will begin a year-long stay in space. So good luck, Captain. Make sure to Instagram it.
I can't think of two presidents so unlike each other than Trump and Obama, and yet both of them, in major speeches at the start of the year, talked about sending astronauts to Mars. And this is nothing new. 60 years ago today, President Lyndon Johnson gave a speech in which he mentioned a rocket going to Mars and how that might affect our viewpoint here on Earth, thinking about Mars as just another globe, just another continent that we can go and explore.
Even now, a rocket moves toward Mars. It reminds us that the world will not be the same for our children or even for ourselves in a short span of years.
And of course, the speech that I always remember because it happened just a few days after I was born, President Ronald Reagan gave his State of the Union in 1984, where he talked about space station freedom and creating a space station within a decade.
America has always been greatest when we dared to be great. We can reach for greatness again. We can follow our dreams to distant stars, living and working in space for peaceful economic and scientific gain. Tonight, I am directing NASA to develop a permanently manned space station and to do it within a decade.
Now, of course, it took longer than a decade to get the International Space Station funded and flying. It was just under 15 years from when he gave that speech to when the first module of the ISS was launched, and then another 2 years after that before the ISS was inhabited. And then you can't even consider the ISS fully finished because the Russians still have modules that they may or may not ever fly. And the only reason the US segment of the ISS is considered finished is because we stopped flying Space Shuttle in 2011 and we called ISS finished on the US side. So it took quite a long time, decades, for Ronald Reagan's vision of a space station to be realized, not within a decade. And so I want you to take away from that it always takes longer than people want. The visions that people put out there, it will take a long time, and it needs to be funded by Congress because the president can dictate the direction, but it's Congress who has to fund it. If Congress in any way pushes back on any initiative to, let's say, cancel the direction of going to the moon and going to Mars instead, if there's any kind of pushback from Congress, we will definitely see delays. We might not see it even happen at all. One thing I want you to remember is that under Barack Obama, there was that push to go to Mars. That was fairly unpopular, and so when it was canceled, it was the Trump administration who created the Artemis program that we know today to focus on sending people to the moon and then Mars. And so will the Trump administration #2 cancel what it did or change majorly the direction of what it created under the Artemis program in its first term? I don't know. Again, we're back to speculation. I want you to take away that the speeches that are given, they're more like wish lists. They're more like dreams. They are the way that the president wants to go, the direction they want to go. And the timeline, the budget, and the realities of the situation have to do with the politics. There are going to be compromises as we look ahead to what the second Trump administration is able to accomplish. And now we also have a third person that we've not talked about yet, which is Jared Isaacman, who might have his own ideas about the direction. He is taking orders from the executive branch, from the president, but he will have his own spin on things. He will have his own priorities. I am assuming Jared Isaacman is going to be confirmed, and we can see in history past how there are conflicts between the president and the NASA administrator, even though one is the boss of the other. So we're just going to have to see how this all plays out. I caution you against too much speculation or too much reading into the speculation that you might be reading, because nobody is going to know what Donald Trump is truly going to do.